Hi and welcome back. So this is our second learning objectives where we look at the money supply, money demand, and money equilibrium. And as we said in our last objective, what we're doing is there's an inverse relationship between the value of a dollar and the price level. Okay, so what we're going to do is take a look at the quantity theory of money using a supply and demand diagram. We'll start with that and then we'll move into the equation. So let's look at the supply diagram. Now, as we said, the Fed, or the central bank, they determine the amount of the money supply, and we're going to assume that the Fed precisely controls the money supply. So in terms of economics, what we would say is that the money supply is going to be what we call perfectly inelastic. And so if we draw the money supply, it's going to basically look like a perfectly vertical line here. So that's what the money supply means here, in that it's fixed at some amount. Some fixed amount will be what the money supply is. Okay, the money demand comes from us. We need money as a medium of exchange, a store of value, and a way to propel our wealth into the future. So it really depends on the price level. Think about gas. And when I talk to students about this idea, I say, we don't take an exact amount of money when we buy gas. We don't take exactly to the penny because we're not really sure about how much gas is going to cost us. And so we take an approximate amount, but it might be slightly more than that or it might be slightly less than that. So sometimes it's difficult to decide exactly how much money that we need. And so because the volatility of gas, the price of gas goes up and down, we're not really sure exactly how much money that we need. So we have a demand for money. Our price levels are pretty steady here in this country, but that's not necessarily true in other countries. So if you kind of think about the price of gas, that kind of makes sense to us in terms of volatility. So this is a good example of the quantity theory of money in terms of a graphic. And so in this particular graphic, there's a couple things I want to point out to you. So if we look over here at our traditional axis, what we would say is our y-axis over here with the value of money, notice it's 1 over the price level, showing that the value of money is inversely related to the price level or the consumer price index over here on the opposite axis. Also notice that the y-axis, we would start down here, and this is the low side, and up here is the high side. You're probably familiar with that. But over here on the price level side, the high side becomes the opposite, and then the low side is up at the top. So that's kind of a little bit different. Now, a lot of students say, well, how did we get the numbers over here on the price level? It's kind of simple if you think about it, because the value of money is 1 over the price level. So let me take a quarter here. So if the value of money, imagine that we start off right here at $1, okay? So if the value of money is $1, that means $1 buys $1's worth of stuff in the marketplace. So we'd have 1 over 1, and the 1 over 1, if we follow that across, we would say, okay, 1 over 1 is equal to $1. Now let's go down here to a quarter. If our money lost its value, and now our $1 only buys 25 cents worth of things, or a quarter of its purchasing power, we would say, okay, it's only worth 25 cents, or 1/4 of what it was worth. If we take the reciprocal of that, that's 4 over 1. Let's see if I can draw this here. That's 4 over 1. And so if we follow that over, that's where this 4 came from. Just like 1/2 is 2 over 1, that's where this 2 came from. 3/4, 4 over 3, and that's where this 1.33 came from. So hopefully this makes sense in terms of the value of money is inversely related to the price level. So as we said, that the Fed is going to fix the money supply. It's going to be perfectly inelastic, and so the money supply here is set at maybe $1,000. We'll just keep it simple. And so the supply of money is fixed by the central bank, Fed in our circumstance, demand for money. So for various reasons, and let me go ahead and put a demand for money in here. So here's our money demanded, okay, and we'll call that MD1, where the demand for money intersects the money supply right here at point A. That's going to be our equilibrium value of money. So right now that dollar is only buying 50 cents. Imagine it this way. You have $1. That $1 is only buying half of what it did previously. So you can imagine that the dollar is being ripped in half. And so right now that means that our price level has doubled. Our money is only buying 50 cents of what it did, and so we're at price level A. If this were the case, then perhaps what the Fed might do is want to either they might use one of the three tools that we discussed in previous chapters to either increase the money supply, or they might want to decrease the money supply to increase the value of money. So let's go ahead and take a look at the next slide and see kind of what the Fed might do in these instances. So let's say that the Fed decides they're going to inject money into the money supply. So that means then that the Fed would use one of those tools that we talked about. So to increase the money supply, the Fed might do, and let's just go ahead and, I'm going to go ahead and minimize this, and this is always a treat for me to remember how. There we go. So for a monetary injection, the Fed might engage in, okay, so we'll try to think back, what are the three tools? So the first tool is open market operations. So ask yourself, would the Fed buy bonds or sell bonds? If you said sell bonds, then you might want to rethink that. The Fed is actually going to buy bonds, and if they buy bonds, they replace the bonds in circulation with dollars, so that increases the money supply. They might also decrease the required reserve ratio. Remember, the required reserve ratio is how much the Fed has to put, banks have to put on reserve at the Fed. So they might decrease the reserve ratio, which would increase the money supply. The other one is the discount rate, and that is how much the Fed charges to banks to borrow, and they might decrease the discount rate, which would increase the money supply. So the Fed might engage in all of these or any one to increase the money supply. When the Fed does this, what they're doing is increasing the money supply. So they're increasing the money supply, making money less valuable because it's more plentiful. So they increase the money supply, which makes more money, and therefore the value of money decreases, which means then that the price level is going to increase. And that's what we see depicted over here in the chart. Notice that the price level here doubles, and notice that the value of money goes down. So this would be the effects of a monetary injection. And this is kind of what we've seen since the economic collapse of 2008. So basically, increasing the money supply does cause the price level to rise. And again, this kind of recaps that. And we're going to continue to take a look at this in upcoming chapters as well. If you have any questions, as I said, please don't hesitate to email me. Thanks.